Okay, hey everybody, this is George Ortega. This is the Free Will Science and Religion podcast. I'm here with Jamie Soden, Anthony Bishop, Trick Slattery, Chandler Klebs, David Joseph, and Brad Stansell. And the topic for today's talk is how certain governments, certain rich groups of people, successful groups of people will use the free will belief in order to indict and blame and punish and deprive marginalized people. For example, like the poor, they will blame the poor for being poor, relying on free will for their rationale. So like basically this belief in free will, provides the reasoning for these very rich, powerful people to create injustices and maintain injustices in the world. Jamie, how does this work in the UK? How are you seeing this happen?
Well, I sometimes get word from it about from Anthony, because Anthony sometimes tells me about what the Tories have been doing. I mean, you get these news stories coming out of them privatising the NHS. Is that right, Anthony?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I mean, they're trying to go into a new set now. Rather than going to get the National Health Service, they're trying to bring in a PHS, which is like pay health, like centre and stuff instead. It's going to be centered around so people has to pay for the health services instead, rather than like getting it for free for people who are vulnerable or in their old age pensioners and that who usually get it for free. And I think at that point, I think the government are going down the wrong way and they're going to be killing more people. I think when they had the bedroom tax in for the UK going back 2-3 years going back, 10,000 people died in 2013. And that was due to the government who was enforced it into people.
So they're Americanizing our healthcare system, basically.
Right. So, all right, David, what's your take on this? Do you notice this happening in the UK? Because this certainly happens in the US.
I think it all falls under the heading of structural violence, doesn't it? Something along those lines. Just people being in poverty and not being able to afford what they need to survive.
Yeah, but a lot of it comes from like personal blame towards people who don't have a lot.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, when you look on someone's birth certificate, who may have died of a heart attack because they didn't have the affluent lifestyle of someone who can afford to go to the gym or afford to eat healthily. They put that person dies of a heart attack, so they understand that there's a cause there. But what they don't put is that person died of a heart attack because they couldn't afford to live the lifestyle of the other guy who's living healthily.
All right. So it seems like people, very, very rich, and here in the United States, income inequality is major. It's vast. I think there's more income inequality now than perhaps ever in the history of the United States, and it may be similar in the UK. So like, Trick, does it seem to you that the rich are using free will belief as a way of essentially justifying their being able to like control and own as much wealth as they can, and thereby just like be able to like neglect not just I think the poor but the middle class? Do you see that that's kind of like a rationale, and how do you think it would work without the free will belief?
I think, well, they're definitely using the free will belief, but I don't think they actually realize it. Like I think they actually do believe in free will. They're not just using the belief for this reason. They actually think that people could have, people deserve whatever position they're in. So if someone makes it to the top, they deserved it because they
worked hard.
They worked hard or whatnot. And someone at the bottom, they didn't work hard. But what they don't realize, and this goes back into the whole otherwise thing, is that they couldn't have done otherwise. Those people that didn't work hard, that was their causal setup. They couldn't prevent themselves from not working hard. So that's the part that they don't really get. So they think, especially when they see somebody that does, is at the poverty level, and then they happen to bump themselves out of the poverty level and make it big or something like that, they'll use that example and they'll say, well, this person did it, so anybody else can do it, right? So anybody can do it. But this is mistaken thinking, and it's them not understanding that causal variables are different for each person. So they use that to their advantage, but they don't recognize the fact that people can't really lift themselves out of poverty, that they don't really have the causal structure to do that. So it's this whole idea of deserve basically is what kind of gives the whole sense of entitlement. So they think that this person X deserves the position that they're in, which is at the top. They're entitled to it because they worked hard for it, but this person at the lower level, they don't deserve it. So because
all right,
I
hear you. So Brad, how about if, like, tomorrow, next week, by some miracle, the entire world comes to understand that free will is an illusion, including the rich and powerful. How do you think that would change the structure of how they do things?
Personally, I don't think it would change much at all. I mean, it would be a revelation, to be sure, but I don't think it'd be a revolution per se. I think we'd still have the same problems. We'd still have to deal with the same issues like poverty and the less people with the lower station in life, people with who think they deserve it all, the Ross Perot's of the world. It would be a philosophy that people could live by, but it really wouldn't change much. I mean, I think we would still have to hold people to being responsible for their actions just as much as, I mean, I don't know if you guys heard about, you probably did, the woman who drowned her kids in the bathtub, and then she said, "Oh, God told me to do it."
All right, yeah, no, I get
we have kind of a Christian society over here in the States, but it's still, I mean, we put her face to the fire, and she was responsible for her actions, despite the fact that she blamed God. It wasn't my fault; it was God's fault. But we'd still have the same problems, even if it was from an atheistic pursuit, that there is no free will.
I don't think we would actually say that she was really responsible. What we deter such. We would incarcerate to prevent from happening again, but we wouldn't really say that she could have done something other than what she did. And that's the kind of key there. If she couldn't have done something other than she did, then she's not really any more responsible than a hurricane is for knocking off your rooftop. Yes, we want to stop the hurricane. We want to prevent the hurricane. We want to, if we can put the hurricane in a box, we'll do that. Yes, because
so this is about like compensation for effort, and like when you think about it, for example, like, do you think that, for example, people who are taller should have, special privileges than people who are not as tall, or people who are whiter should have special privileges, than darker skinned people? Because, like, basically, if you think that those seem unfair, then let's apply it to, for example, intelligence and ambition and the kinds of qualities that allow certain people to excel over others. So in other words, like, because these qualities are not up to us, I think perhaps the rich may still want to, cling to their beliefs out of self-interest, because again, they're human beings, this is one of our failings. But I think the revolution would come in the sense of people of the middle class and the poor, finally saying, wait a minute, this is not fair. And, I think it would be reflected in the political system. Anthony, how's that sound? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think is not really fair, to be honest, actually, because, I mean, you talk about these people who are rich, powerful people, and they were on top, and that they deserve these things because they've earned it. I've noticed in papers there's some people who are rich and powerful, and they've just been put there for no reason. They haven't done anything for it. They've not got any equalities at all. They've got no ambitions to stay there. All they want is just the money and stuff. Yeah, they've inherited it, or they've got it given to them, like food, sent to them and stuff, like, and like they've grown into the family for it, and like there's silver spoons put in their mouths and stuff. And like, to be honest, I mean, would you want to give those sort of people the luxuries, the rewards for it when they've done nothing?
Wasn't that the rationale for abolishing the monarchy? This idea that because one's father and grandfather had title and had these kinds of privileges because of title, then the children automatically, without any kind of like deserving or even abilities or qualities, necessitated that, or just like deserve that. Chandler, what's your thought?
Well, yeah, people act like, for example, a king, like one of their sons would become the next king, not because this person was qualified to, lead a country or whatever, but because they were the biological son, firstborn or something of this other king, as if that has anything to do with it. So yeah, this is an example where people inherit something, but it doesn't mean that they deserve it in any sense. It doesn't mean that they will even know how to use it effectively. And this is a serious problem because it happens all the time. People, they inherit stuff from their parents or grandparents, and this gives them an advantage in life that others don't have, just as, our talents, our abilities, biologically, that we don't choose, give certain advantages and disadvantages. So yeah, it's the same old thing, realizing that nobody is any more deserving than anyone else. And yeah, it's just really frustrating.
Excellent. All right, now Trick, you raised a very important point before. Basically, these rich and powerful, they don't believe they're doing anything wrong, because they believe in free will. So David, I mean, how would that understanding basically frame or guide how we might go about changing the world? In other words, we don't want to vilify them. We don't want to condemn them because they don't have a free will. They're going, with their guiding beliefs. So what would Trick's basically statement about they're really not understanding that they don't have a free will, how would that reflect how we would go about changing the world to the extent that we would want to in order to make it more fair?
So we're talking about the flip side of blame, basically. So you've got blame on one hand, and you've got, saying you deserve something on the other for something that you've done, despite the fact that you didn't really choose to do it.
Exactly. In other words, this is more of kind of like a strategic political question. In other words, like, we don't want to vilify them. We don't want to condemn them. We don't want to blame them for their beliefs. So how do we present this truth to them in a way that they can accept without, because like what happens, like, when people believe in free will, they will, and you accuse them of something, they're going to blame themselves. And actually they may deny what they did. They'll go into defensive postures and all. So like, how do we approach the rich in a way that that they're not going to feel that way, that they're not going to feel indicted, and that hopefully can better appreciate the vast implications of our not having a free will?
Can you ask me one about sport?
All right, Trick, why don't you handle that one?
It has to do with ego and trying to, and I don't think it's really something easy to do at all. I don't even know if we can do it, because the people at that level, a lot of times they have this egoist
narcissistic
psychology that's already built in. So it's kind of playing to that psychology, and once that psychology is there, it's really something hard to combat. So
yeah, because
I don't.
They're really narcissistic, and it's hard to get someone out of that mindset.
Yeah, they were pretty much born with it.
Yeah, right. So they think that whatever they've done, deserves whatever they get. They have this the egoism to already say that basically they're giving themselves ownership rights. So and this is another topic probably we should get into at some point, is how the whole lack of free will belief ties into this idea of ownership rights, because it really changes things around on that side of things too. But they think that they own it because they think they deserve it. So it all ties back into deserve, and then
And
they think they
greed as
deserve it
well
because they
comes
have
into
free
it.
will. So how do we get them to understand that that this isn't the case? We have to combat their idea of free will, but that's not an easy task for these people. So I don't know.
Right. All right. So basically, because the problem is that we need to get them to understand because they are essentially in control of the education system, the politics, the media. At least here in the United States, pretty much so much of our politics and what happens or doesn't happen is controlled by money. The money in politics. So, all right, Brad, how could we how do you think we would need to address them? What do you think we could say to them to get them to better understand not just that we don't have a free will, that it's it's virtually impossible and all, but that it might actually benefit them, like, because I think coming from self-interest, is there any benefit to them to kind of like understanding that nothing is up to us?
There is absolutely none. And that's I mean, you're not going to convince them that what they did in their past does not somehow, I want to avoid this word, but entitle them to what they have. I mean, Bill Gates, for example, he came from a garage and now he owns an empire, but still he's in that position where he gives away a lot of his profit to other people. And it's that sense of altruism that you really need to instill in the upper class in order to benefit everyone. And a lot of them avoid it. They don't want to go that route because it sounds a lot like, in the big C word, communism. And we spent a whole decade trying to get rid of that. But communism, it's not such a bad thing because it benefits everybody. I mean, socialism the same way. You're really not going to convince you're not going to convince them by saying there's no free will, therefore you need to give away everything. Because, I mean, George, I mean, I know you wrote a book. I mean, do you think you should benefit from the sale of that book, from people buying that book? Do you think you should benefit from people being intrigued by that book? I mean, by this line of thinking, I mean, you shouldn't get any of the profits from that book. I mean,
regardless if it's capitalism or communism, ultimately.
Brad, all right, you make a good point. Here's my answer would be, for example, like, I think medicine is a perfect example. You've got these doctors. I really admire doctors, the medical profession, because they have to work so hard for so many years to then, help the world, to help, keep the world healthy and all. And so basically, if they're going to like spend that much effort, and I actually don't think they should have to pay for their education. I think society, because of the service they do for us. But like, if they're spending that much effort, then absolutely they deserve, I think, a lot more money than, let's say, somebody who decides to become a professional caddy. Because they like to just walk around on golf courses because it's pleasant and all. But the idea is like, so where is the limit? In other words, like, yes, fine, let's pay the doctors 5-10 times more than let's say waitresses or whatever.
George, I'd like to say that I would think that they actually don't deserve more, but that we have to play to incentives to get people to be productive, and that's the problem with the idea that we don't have free will. Or the idea that we have free will is because so many people think we have free will, we have to play to those incentives. We have to play a balancing act between basically unfairness and incentive. So it's a scale that we have to for economically play to. Otherwise, we're not going to have a productive society. But the problem comes down to not the fact that they actually deserve the more money. It's just a mechanism to make them more productive. And that production obviously will help society out in the long run. So we have to have that. If we didn't have to have that, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But since we have to have that, then we need to play to those incentives. But I don't like the I don't
not
like the
gonna-
idea that
it's
they
not-
actually deserve.
No, I agree with you. It was a wrong choice of words. It's basically the economic equivalent of our reward and punishment system, like in criminal justice. In other words, like
Yes.
we know even nothing's up to any of us, but we need to maintain civilization. We need laws, we need rules. So we need to have punishments and rewards to motivate our behavior. And yes, this also applies not just to the criminal justice system, but to the economic system. That's a great point, Trick. Yep.
Actually,
Yeah.
could I say something at all?
Yeah.
Absolutely, Anthony. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like for David Cameron, for instance, he goes on holiday for like 7 times, 8 times a year. And the thing is, I mean, does he deserve to go on holiday, even though he's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, right? Does he deserve to go to all these places and be funded all this money for him just to see to these other
Andy,
people?
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I think what you mean to say is, does he deserve those holidays more than other people? Is that what you're
Yeah,
trying to say?
I'm just getting to that bit though. But I mean, like you got real people out there with real jobs, right? And they've worked all their entire lives, and they've got all this money saved up. And then in a blink of an eye, David Cameron puts a big fucking huge tax on them, and then just takes half of their, like, actually probably a third of their money away from them. And they've earned that. And to be honest, with retirements, they go into these houses. They have their own these rented houses, and then suddenly they've been in their houses for about 50, 60 years, which they've lived there, all their lives and stuff. Then David Cameron comes along and says, right, because you've got an extra spare bedroom, right, we're going to put a tax on that. And we're also, as we're going to put a tax on that, right, you're going to have to move out and get these other houses, the same house, for other people, for new families, members to move in. So you'll have to go out on the street, or you have to find somewhere else to live. I mean, it doesn't seem fair.
So he seems to be making the poor make sacrifices, but he doesn't want to like have the rich make sacrifices.
Yeah.
All right. So like, these, the rich, and again, like, whether it's criminals or the rich, if we had their experience, if we had their background, if we were in their shoes, we'd probably be thinking pretty much like they. So it's not a matter of blame, but in terms of getting them to understand, how about from self-interest? How about like, the current, I think that, the number of billionaires in the world now, I think they own and control more wealth than, I don't know, at least 90% of the rest of the world. And like the problem with that, if you consider it relative to climate change, basically, and this is also free will, basically they're saying, of my free will, I'm entitled to do whatever I want with this, including, controlling our governments as much as the law will allow. And, they kind of like try to create laws that allow them more and more to do that. So in terms of self-interest, to the extent that we allow them to control a lot more money for their personal interest and not basically, not really being very concerned of the public welfare or the future, then what happens is that like they will probably be much more likely to continue and maintain and promote the kinds of like industries and policies and practices that will make a climate change that's already devastating. Already, who knows how we're going to like get out of it, but it can only make it worse. So in other words, like if, as a message to them, if they care about their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, that might be a way to get them to appreciate, that they're not having a free will, that nobody's having a free will, does have vast implications, that like, it can really change things, not just for the rest of the world, but for them as well. David, how's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Sorry, Chandler, were you gonna...
Yeah, I had something to say. Actually, I wanted to respond to what Brad said, about how you publish books, do you deserve to take the royalties from that and all that. And what's interesting is I think that's a subject for a whole other podcast to go at it in length about ownership, copyright, authors, all that kind of stuff, since, George, Trick, and I have published books. So that's a very good topic. But yeah, I agree with what, Trick said. It's more of an incentive thing. Like, you understand that people, in order to encourage them to keep doing something because it's valuable, you want to financially reward them, even though they don't technically deserve it. So there's an incentive there.
Also, just to clarify that the whole like book thing or whatever, if one individual person was to give all their wealth away to to everybody, basically all that does is it puts one individual into the poverty level.
Yeah.
If everybody, on the other hand, if everybody in the whole world distributed their wealth equally, then that person would not be in poverty. So there's a big difference between everybody distributing their wealth and an individual distributing their wealth. So it's an understanding that has to be global before something like not caring about profit from a book becomes practical or whatever or whatever thing you do. Profit is kind of important right now only because it'll put you into the poverty level, and it's not going to make a big difference globally. So we have to distinguish between these two things. There's a global understanding of a lack of free will, and then there's single individual that who if they were going to distribute their wealth, it's not going to help much, and it'll make their life worse, basically. So,
I actually heard that the top 100 billionaires could solve poverty overnight if they put their spare money together. I don't know how true that is, though. I'm not going to
Actually,
They
David,
probably could.
yeah.
I was bringing up George's books simply because it's a matter of motivation. You're not going to convince any billionaire to distribute his wealth by saying, "Hey, you have no free will. Might as well distribute your wealth." They'll just say, "Okay, I don't care. I live fine without free will, I guess," because they don't really care about that. It's a matter of motivation and desire. I think you approach the problem essentially from, you can be the biggest, you can be the first gazillionaire in the world, and you'll be the only gazillionaire in the world, and you can be the only person in the world with $1 million, but you'll still be the only person in the world. You need everybody else. It's a community. You need to make them understand the synergy between people in order to. I mean, this problem has really nothing to do with free will. It's a matter of synergy because they can't. You brought up the person who's going to be a professional caddy for the rest of their life. You can go golfing with $1 million, but unless you have that caddy, everybody has a role to play, and it's a synergy of community, really. One person cannot survive on the entire world if they're the only person there. They need other people, and they need to support the community, and that's really what it comes down to. That's really what this argument comes down to, because as much as I like to talk about free will, it really has nothing to do with free will because they don't care about that. They'll just say, okay, I'm still getting martinis every day. I'll just spend my money. Fine, I don't have free will. Fine, I'll drink to that. But you really have to encourage them to support the community because it's really the community. It takes a community to raise a child. You need that support system in order for you to make your money. So you might as well support it. You might as well give a child an education. You might as well give somebody food instead of bullets.
Absolutely. Guys, we got about a little over a minute left. Brad, you're right. If basically the rich are not, so very separate from the rest of the world. Emotions are contagious. And for example, if this free will belief among the population is driving people to logically blame each other and indict each other and accuse each other and, go after each other, you have to posit that perhaps it's creating a global environment that isn't as peaceful as it could be. So we want to explore, now we're at the point where we've pretty much refuted free will. So now we're getting into what does it mean? And so we're going to explore this in much more detail. All right, so this is George Ortega for Free Will, Science and Religion with Jamie Soden, Anthony Bishop, Trick Slattery, Chandler Klebs, David Joseph, and Brad Stansell. And we're going to be back talking about this, just exploring the vast implications of our world overcoming the belief in free will. Okay, thanks for listening.